Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Moreno. Our first guest today is Dr. James Wetherbe, who is a professor at Texas Tech University. He is also an author of Achieving High Performance Friendship, a book for men, and he also co-authored a book titled Hispanic Immigration, Separating Facts from Fiction. We'll also discuss that. Dr. Wetherbe is also an NMSU alum, and he recently made a large gift to help build a spiritual center here on campus, which we will also discuss. Please welcome Dr. James Wetherbe.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'd like to start off a little bit and talk about your book, Hispanic Immigration,
Sure.
that you helped co-author. Could you share with our audience a little bit of some of the main points? What was really the motivation for the book and the main points of it?
Sure, Anthony, and thanks for asking. I had a student in one of my MBA classes, executive MBA at Texas Tech, and he is an attorney, graduate from the University of Michigan, and he represents Hispanics on immigration issues. And I learned a great deal from him about some of the challenges that they were facing, and along the way realized there was a lot of confusion, what you hear in the news versus what some of the real facts are in terms of Hispanic immigration. And along the way, he was looking for ways to sort of promote his services, and I said the best way for you to do that is be an author. And you've got a lot of great ideas. And he said, well, I've never written a book. So by the end of the day, we ended up collaborating on the book because I'm from New Mexico and of course have a lot of Hispanic friends in my background and thought it would be a great project. So we ended up writing the book together.
Wow. Now, what about the book? You know, you separate a lot of fact from fiction. I mean, you're really just trying to get rid of the noise that surrounds us all the time around the issue.
Sure. There were some really interesting insights that came out of it. One thing is a lot of people think this is like a recent phenomenon. You really have to realize this country, unless you're a Native American, is based upon immigration. And so you can go back and look at the Irish and the Germans and the Jews and everyone that migrated to this country. And they played a crucial role in developing the economy. And one of the dynamics that's really important is that people who are looking for opportunity came to America, and in so doing, they're willing to take whatever type of work they could to get their foot in the door and have the possibilities that are available in this country. And so it was actually interesting. There was even a time when the Germans would say they were German American. They would make that distinction. And so it's a big phenomenon now because the biggest immigration clearly is Hispanic. We are a country with lots of Hispanics in it, so it's a very important factor. So the idea was, let's just get a handle on what does this really mean and what's it doing to our culture.
I was reading some of the book, and it said that the draw to come to this country, the economic impact for just one immigrant is just startling.
It is, and this is true of any country around the world. In fact, I got to visit Berlin shortly after the wall came down, and what you find is that people would risk their lives to get from East Berlin to West Berlin. In fact, there was a car back then called the Isetta. BMW made a car called the Isetta. It had an engine in the back, and people would climb in and wrap themselves around the motor just to try to get across the border. If they got caught, they would get killed. And so that's how desperate they were to get across. But the economic number that is used is when there is a ratio difference of 7 to 1. That means it's 7 times better opportunity-wise over here than where I'm at. People will risk their lives to try to get across and participate in that opportunity.
Wow. I have this image of just, people wrapped in the car around the motor. It's just so dangerous.
Yes, indeed.
I'd like to talk about your other book a little bit, about friendship. Share with us a little bit about that.
Well, a colleague of mine and I, he was actually a former pastor, and it kind of relates to the spiritual center that was a gift for New Mexico State University. And one of the things that we had noticed over the years in the research, that men aren't as good at friendship as women are in terms of opening up, sharing, soul bearing, things of that nature. And so that's why when we say it's, the subtitle says a book for men, it's not that you're trying to do a favor for men. We're kind of calling them out, saying you're not as good at this as you should be. In fact, we have found that more books are actually purchased by women than men, and guess who they're giving them to? Sons, brothers, fathers, husbands, and trying to help them with their friendship because they tend to be just too closed in. And so what my friend and I were doing was we took a look at the way Jesus approached friendship, because we have documentation of 3 years of his life, and how did he approach friendship. So as an example, when Christ went to the Garden of Gethsemane, he took his best friends with him, and he let them overhear a very heart-rendering, private type of prayer. And he was okay with that. And we know that happened because they documented what he said in the prayer. Mm-hmm. Most men would be reluctant to do that in front of other men. And so the point we're trying to get at is if Christ was willing to do that and open up and bare his soul in front of his friends and pray in front of his friends, why should men be so reluctant to do that?
Why, in your findings, why is it so difficult for a man to really express himself in these ways? Great question.
Culturally we're brought up to be, macho and independent, and big boys don't cry, and we don't ever want to show our weaknesses.
Act like a man.
Man up. We've got a lot of expressions, and we do a real disservice. We have some sort of litmus test for what we mean by a high performance friend. And some of the questions we ask people: do you have somebody that you could call at 3 o'clock in the morning if you were hurting and you needed a friend to talk to? And do you have friends who would call you and you would feel honored that they would reach out to you? It's kind of a litmus test. Do you have that type of dynamic in your life?
Now, you mentioned culture. How big of an impact does culture have on our spirituality?
Well, it has quite a bit, obviously, because we get culturally conditioned. Some people actually, they'll participate in a particular religion because it's good business to do so. If you want to make business contacts and things like that, which isn't what it should all be about. So we do get conditioned to follow certain mores. I remember I was a rock musician as a young man, and that's why I had long hair, and I wasn't supposed to have long hair in the church that I went to, so I was taking a lot of grief about it. And it made no sense to me, because every artistic rendering I'd ever seen of Jesus Christ, he had long hair. Whether he did or not, I don't know for sure, but the point is, why should my hair length have anything to do with me seeking to have a relationship with God?
Hmm. So you feel like that really played a role in, when you're younger, on how you would approach your own spirituality?
Well, I think, and this is one of the reasons for the Spiritual Center gift, is when we go off to college, it's the first time we don't have as much parental oversight. Because a lot of us, we just grow up believing what our parents teach us to believe. And when you get to college, you realize, wow, there's other people who believe very different things, and it doesn't take you long to figure out, I would probably believe something different if I was brought up in a different home and with a different type of religion. And so a lot of people at that young age go through a period of questioning and doubting. And so we want to provide an interfaith type facility where students could have conversations. New Mexico State, I love the theme that they have, which is discovery. And what better thing to discover than what other people believe and why they believe it, so we can all be introspective and decide how that fits into our belief system.
Now, how does education match with spirituality?
Well, learning is learning, and one thing you want to do certainly is at a university, you want to learn things that would help you have a career, but you also want to get a liberal education so you understand things like economics and arts and so forth. And spirituality is part of the learning process. It's a very important part of our lives and how we approach things, how we view things, and how we have relationships.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Spiritual Center. You were heavily involved in it.
Right.
You didn't just write a check and pray to gift. You found that out, that you were heavily involved. How is the center going to be used?
Well, I guess kind of a simple way to think about it, have you ever been in a hospital with all the chaos and found a chapel in a church, and you just step in and it just feels like a place of refuge that you can just sit down and be quiet with your thoughts and reflect? so forth. And so the goal was to create a place that was convenient. And it's right on the mall. You can just pass it anytime you want. You can step off and go inside if you want to spend 5 minutes, you want to spend 10 minutes. In fact, my co-author on the book, Friendship, told me as I was thinking this concept through that when he was a student at the University of Oregon, and after the football loss, you know they need spiritual help. So he said that there was a chapel right by his fraternity house, and he said every night at 10:30 he would meet over there with his friends, and they would spend time together, and how important a role that played in terms of him going through a lot of doubting that he had during his college years. So the goal was to put it someplace convenient that was very accessible, not intimidating. We wanted kind of a charming and inviting, but yet very private. There's block glass, but there's not windows, so people, if you're in there, you can feel a real sense of privacy. And we just wanted it to be nice enough that it felt great, but not so nice that you couldn't leave it open all the time, if you follow what I'm saying. So the goal is that people should feel free to drop in and spend some time individually or with a group, but also it can be used for bigger events such as marriages. I kidded with President Carruthers. I said when we started this, if we can just make this, get this thing done before either one of us die, we can have it for our we can use it for our memorial service.
I see. Yeah, I know that there are universities in around the country that have similar things,
Right.
and they do use those
Right.
for.
And we didn't have one. And it was one of those things I hadn't noticed we didn't have one when I was a student. But as I started being a professor and visiting other campuses, I'd see sometimes they would have those, and I think we don't have one at Mexico State. And so that was part of the inspiration for doing it.
Well, I'm kind of curious though. I mean, it says that this is open for all religions.
Yes.
You know, how do you determine, you know, what groups can use the spiritual center?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one of the issues that came up. I shared with President Carruthers when this started. I said, you know, this is going to be different because there's not a lot of campuses that are adding a new facility like this. And I said, you know, there may be some pushback and some challenges. And he said, I know there will be, and I look forward to it, which is, I admire him so much. His leadership is just amazing, and his courage. We need more courageous leaders. But, you know, we work through the Interfaith Council. And some of the things that had to be very clear is it had to be open to any faith or any non-faith. If atheists want to have a meeting and spend some time in there, they can schedule it. Pagans can schedule time in there. The building actually is facing east, so if the Muslims want to use it, they can use it. So we believe that religion can cause problems more when people don't understand each other than when they do understand each other. So we really embraced the idea that this is an interfaith facility.
Well, I want to thank
and
you.
non-faith facility.
I see. Well, thank you for clarifying that for
sure.
us. I want to thank you very much for joining us on Fronteras.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Our guest was Dr. James Wetherbe. He is a professor at Texas Tech University and a New Mexico State University alum, and he recently helped build the Spiritual Center here on the campus of New Mexico State University. I'm Anthony Moreno. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our next guest was recently recognized by Insight into Diversity magazine for her efforts on designing a course that helps put diversity into practice for teachers so they can educate all students. She has also done research into understanding values behind Hispanics enrolling and departing from college. Please welcome from Instructional Innovation and Quality at NMSU, Sharon Lalla. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about this award that you recently were honored with. Could you share with us a little bit about that?
I'm certainly honored by this award. I know that past recipients of the award are typically granted the award because of life work. Hopefully I have many more years to go to call it life work, but I certainly consider it a beginning. I also certainly consider it an honor, and I think the focus of the award is typically to kind of see how individuals in higher ed who practice diversity in their environments through work, through their personal lives. So I mean, I think that's basically the definition, or at least the requirements or qualities that they're looking for in this award. So why they picked me, I don't know.
Well, they picked you because of this course. I'd like to learn a little bit more about the course that you helped design and the reasons behind it. Why did you feel the need for this course and move on it?
Well, the course is called, it's in through the Education College, and it's EDLT 579, and it's Universal Design for Online Course Design. And typically, it's been my experience that, especially when we find our passions, that, and one of them is inclusion. For me, is how do you practice inclusion on a daily basis, not only in the classroom but also in your life. So I teach teachers to teach online. So the focus then became, how do we practice inclusion in a virtual world, especially when inclusion is so difficult to practice in a face-to-face world. So those were challenges that were open to me, and I kind of wanted to investigate how to do that in the virtual world. The course that I'm teaching, I've taught it 3 times now. It started in 2012, and I'm teaching it primarily in the spring. It is a core course that can be used by anyone who's actually teaching in a classroom, whether they're in K through 12 or higher ed, or even a trainer. But it hopefully opens the lens or broadens that lens for the person who is designing curriculum. I proposed this particular course through Susie Bussman in the OTL program, the Online Teaching and Learning. She pushed it forward to the curriculum committee, and it got approved in 2012. And so I kind of call it my baby, because I designed the goals and the objectives for the course, and then also tried to visualize what does it look like in a virtual world. What does inclusion look like in a virtual world? So that's kind of how it started.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, you said that inclusion is a struggle in just face-to-face.
Oh, absolutely.
What are the challenges online that people face when they're dealing with something like this for a course?
Well, I mean, probably the most obvious, and again, usually any time I look at teaching, I'm looking at it from the student perspective. That's kind of just comes from my background in technical communication, where the learner was the most important, focus of prior to designing any sort of curriculum for them. So in an online environment, one of the most common problems is isolation. So students who feel isolated in a large classroom in a face-to-face environment feel even more isolation in a virtual environment. And there's a number of reasons why. They might feel comfortable to be in the online environment, but there's no sort of one-on-one interaction. We don't get to see those visual cues that we get in a classroom. So when the teacher says something, you know that the students are understanding and they're moving forward. If they don't, you can actually, like, I'm looking at your eyes and you have a well, then I'm thinking, oh, you might have another question, so I can call on you to ask you to to elaborate. In an online classroom, you don't get that. So in a virtual world, the learner is basically on his or her own, using his own experiences and educational experiences and culture to decide how they're going to respond. So the first step is to really kind of connect with those students in a way that makes them feel like a person and not just a discussion in a discussion board or an email. And there are a number of things to do. I mean, I developed a course, and I've taught this course elsewhere, called Ready, Set, Connect. And in this in this particular workshop, it focuses on how we as instructors learn to connect with those students, those learners, and what sort of practical ways we can do that. For example, even calling them by name in their emails is a good start. If you have give face-to-face opportunities that are synchronous using some of the technologies like Adobe Connect, those are ways that you can reach out for those who are interested in reaching out. There are going to be those who don't want to reach out and feel very comfortable continuing their communications through email. And those are choices you give those learners. And when you give those choices, then you definitely open up a new way of communicating with your students.
And you mentioned, starting off just making sure that a student, feels like a person, addressing them as a person. What are some examples of that, how a professor, or teacher, an educator can do that?
Okay, in a virtual environment, in the emails, you call them by name. In the first couple of weeks of the semester, there's a lot of interaction. One is introducing yourself, and as the instructor, I also introduce myself and I provide information about me so that they can get to know me. As an instructor, you can offer those asynchronous session I actually have, the course just started last week, so I have 3 opportunities for them to meet me face to face in a virtual world using Adobe Connect. So those who feel compelled can. It's optional, so I record those. So again, it gives those students who want to know the information that I might be presenting but do not or cannot attend at that time. Many people who take virtual classes or online courses take courses because they're non-traditional students. Although we are finding that a lot of our traditional students are also taking the online courses as well. So it just expands the opportunity to kind of get to know them. So those are a couple of ways. There's a lot of discussions within the first couple of weeks, and I think those first couple of weeks are really crucial to kind of set the tone for the rest of the course. But there are also things like, what does online mean to you? What do you expect from your online instructor? What's a good online course? What's been your experience? And they share, and it also gives me some feedback about what they really like versus what they don't like. And again, I can kind of address and hopefully modify the way I am responding to them to meet that need. And then of course, all through the entire semester, feedback is really crucial. And unfortunately, many of the students have said to me at the end, because I asked them for their feedback several times during the semester, and at the end, many of them say, I've never had any feedback from my instructor about how I'm doing, about other than a grade. So they feel as though that also connects them when they can get a sense of that they are a real person, that their contributions matter. When they have grades that are probably not A's, that they know where to go. They can ask me, and then again in online environments you can provide rubrics. So those rubrics are detailed enough for them to say, oh, okay, this is where I might be able to improve the next time I turn in an assignment. So it's sort of it's a process. It begins with a lot of heavy interaction. And it continues with interaction even weekly. For example, another example, during the week they discuss with each other, and at the end of the week I send them feedback about their discussion directly to that particular student. It's not to the entire class, but it's to the student, and hopefully it's balanced. Some strengths and some areas that they may want to look into.
I see. Well, it's very fascinating work. It sounds like designing a course like that. I mean, the way that the university model is going with more colleges promoting all online degrees and things like that.
Absolutely.
For both traditional and non-traditional students, it seems like this work is very important for a lot of educators. I'd like to talk with you a little bit about some of the other work that you've done involving Hispanic students and the work that you've researched in regards to values that guide Hispanic students to enter and leave college. I'd like to learn a little bit more about some work you've done with that. What are some of the values? And we just have like a few minutes left, so I want to get this.
Well, what I was interested in finding out is many first-generation students especially were enrolling in higher ed, in colleges and universities. But they were leaving, within the first year to 3 years. And we already have, research already tells us, for example, that first generation Hispanic students are not graduating. And also they're not graduating within a 4-year period. We also know that the Hispanics will be the majority in probably about 2030. So we have that data that tells us, what our problem is. And so what I wanted to do, my degree is actually in educational technology and leadership from Pepperdine University. And while I could have approached, the educational technology angle, what I wanted to do again is find out more about those learners, because when you learn about learners, you can continue to build upon the way you design and deliver your curriculum. So I kind of took a little bit of a turn in terms of the study that I did take. But what I wanted to do is find out, okay, you chose to go to college and you also chose to depart. So what were the reasons? So what I wanted to do is hear the student voice. So I conducted a study using narrative inquiry, and we looked at it from the perspective of 36 values. These were some Rokiak's values from that have been used in many, many studies. And so they were divided into two types of values, instrumental and terminal. Now your terminal are really your goal behavior, your goals, goal-oriented values. And those things are like, I want to have a good life and I want to be successful. I want to be happy. Those are sort of terminal goals. And then you have instrumental goals, which are really behaviors that lead, they're concepts that lead toward behavior. So they're more like, it's important to me, family is very important to me, so I'm going to make my decisions based on my family. They are, there's sort of a number of values, and suddenly I can't think of any that are more specific to sort of short term, but they guide your behavior. So as we looked at those 36 values, as I looked at those 36 values, for reasons, as they told their stories about why they enrolled in college and then why they departed, I was able to ascertain what seemed to be more important for these first generation students.
Well, I want to have you back on the show definitely to continue that conversation and learn more about that. It's a very interesting topic and ongoing topic as we're learning more about that issue. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me.
All right. We want to thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Moreno. Have a great day.